Thank you.
Thank you.
Antje, welcome to Rising Up. Thank you for being here with us for this special edition of Rising Up, because as you can see, we are on the road. We are in beautiful Copenhagen for European SharePoint conference. And we decided while all the community is here, all our friends are here and industry experts, why not ask a few of them to sit down with us and share a bit of knowledge.
Thanks for having me. This is very exciting, and it's nice to see you again this time in Copenhagen.
After so long. Yeah, it's really good. We're really excited to have you because we talked a little bit about this already, but being in IT, we often get a little caught up in all the functionality, on the features. We get it. It's exciting, new stuff, bells and whistles. We really focus on that. But we know that you're very much into the whole adoption and change management aspect of things. So we really wanted to have you on so that you could shed some light on that and bring a different perspective to those questions.
Be very happy to do that.
Cool. So before we get started, I'll let you introduce yourself very quickly because you're probably the best person to do that.
Thank you.
You can jump into questions.
Gladly. So I'm Antje Lamartine. I'm based out of Munich, Germany. I work for If Blueprint, and we started with SharePoint, but now we do the whole M365 stack.
Yeah.
And I am the
as we all did.
Oh yeah, I know. It was quite a journey we went through, right? And I'm the lead for M365 adoption change management. So whenever we have some sort of an M365 implementation project, there's a good chance that I and my fellow change management co-workers are involved. We would love to be involved every time.
Yeah. So, are you involved every time?
No, not every time, but eventually, our IT team members know that adoption change is important, so there's a good chance that we get into the project at some point.
Good. Technology and the Microsoft space is evolving really quickly. I think we all feel it. We all have a hard time keeping up with it at some point. So, how do you think that IT teams can actually adapt to all those new methods, essentially of Microsoft 365 and just cloud management in general?
How can they adapt to it? Yeah, that's a big question. I think.
It's pretty broad.
That's very. So I think the first thing that IT departments have to really understand and realize that the times where you have one person that's the expert for a specific topic and nobody else knows more about it, those times are over.
Right. Okay.
So it's going to be broader knowledge across your entire IT department. And then I think the next thing that IT departments have to understand that the changes will be constant. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, Microsoft also provides possibilities for automation. So now the way you actually go about managing these changes are changing, right? You cannot do the manual thing anymore. So you have to make use of automated processes, and that changes your methods, how to deal with it as well. And I think it also means that IT teams will probably have to rethink some of their processes, how to deal with those things. So by process, we're talking about the people side again, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can make things transparent, but at the end of the day, decisions on what to roll out or what to activate or what to deactivate, that's still a human decision.
Right.
So you still have to look into this, discuss it, look at the impact for your environment. Does it make sense for the end users?
Yeah.
And that still needs conversations.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. So there's no like hack or tip. You just gotta sit down, make sure you have enough time to look into that, talk to the users. So how do you see the role of IT evolving in a more kind of solution provider within their organization?
Yeah. So IT definitely is becoming the solution provider, and I think it's not anymore about just keeping the lights on, but figuring out which M365 apps that you have available within your stack, what makes sense for your business, right? For what business are you in?
Yeah.
What are the type of apps that could be useful? And then work together with end users, with the business side of your company, and figure out, well, what is it that you kind of need, and then pick the right things.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing is also, people that work in IT are passionate about IT. obviously.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's why they're in the field.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think they also have to keep in mind to sometimes take it a notch back and say, well, we can be really excited within our IT bubble, and then we
Yeah.
have to take it down a notch.
You're not the users, well, to some
Right.
extent, but yeah.
Right. And then take it down a notch and then talk to the business and talk to the end users and then basically deliver to them what makes sense for them. And by the way, not be offended if the end users might not be crazy about the latest newest thing.
Yeah.
Which we in IT say, oh, this is like
It's
the best
amazing.
thing, sliced bread. Just as we're going to roll this out,
Yeah.
and the end user says, nah.
They have a status report that they need to deliver. They're not focused on the same thing as we are. Yeah.
So I think that's an adjustment IT departments have to make. But at the same time, I think it's also an exciting time because they have an opportunity to
sit at the table more.
and I'm just wondering how I'm going to say that. I don't want to say move out of their silo, but
Yep.
they have, in a way, it's been siloed for a really long time.
100%. Yeah. I think everybody will feel
and
that.
I think
yeah.
it was not even on purpose. I personally, working with change management, I think silos happen because engaging with people, regardless if they're end users or not, well, that can be hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're reaching out to people, you receive their emotions, you get their feedback.
Yeah.
It's sometimes it's skeptical, it's
Yeah.
not always great, and then you have to be able to deal with that. And
Yeah.
it's not easy.
It's a
for
big
everybody.
change. It's a big change
Right.
going from where we're coming from.
Yes, yeah.
Definitely. So with that in mind, so when we're talking about change management, what do you think are the main or the top challenges when it comes to Microsoft 365 and Teams change management?
I think we're living in a very fast world. And from an IT perspective, you want to roll something out. You look at all the different things you got to do on the IT side and you say, well, we can roll this out within 2 months and we're done. Boom.
Mm-hmm.
And IT has to understand that just because you can do it in that speed
Yeah.
doesn't mean you have to.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you should.
Doesn't mean it's going to work.
Doesn't mean it's going to work.
Yeah.
So you have to consider also the pace of the business. And I actually said this in my session yesterday. Well, how many times has it happened that some new app or feature, something was rolled out to finance team at the end of the month or at the end of the year, and there was no awareness that, oh, they're in the month end process.
Yeah.
They really don't care about this new thing, or
Yeah,
they're just
yeah,
trying
yeah.
to wrap up their business year, right?
It's not a good timing.
It's not a good time. Or you roll something fancy new out to marketing department in the middle of their biggest campaign.
Yeah.
Right? And it's this becoming aware of of what the priorities of the business side are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something where IT really has to step out of its own shell. And
Yeah.
that was actually part of my session yesterday. I think one of the things that IT departments have to understand, and there's no option for that. If you roll out M365 or any part of it, you better have a product owner for M365.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have an individual
Yeah.
that says, I own it.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that person has to know everything,
Yeah.
right? It's just
So have a sense of accountability within the
absolutely,
organization. No, definitely.
And
that makes
if
sense.
you don't have that, and I am working in projects with clients where they're rolling out M365, and the end users are really excited about the things that are coming.
Yeah.
And the IT department has a really hard time because they're so used to the olden days where in SharePoint, you would get an upgrade every 3 years.
Yeah.
You could put it in
The reset
in a
every
demo,
year.
right,
Yeah.
in a dev environment. You check it out, you decide, maybe you roll it out, maybe not. Well, and now it just keeps coming.
Yeah.
So product owners the first thing, and then be aware what's coming so you can then act on it.
Yeah.
And you can be proactive versus reactive.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting when you talk about, say, like when you give the examples of like the finance team and the marketing team that are caught up, because while we're saying we're moving away, from just take a step back from technology and use that, and that's not just a step back. That has nothing to do with the technology. That's something that applies all the time. If the marketing team is not available,
Yeah.
that has nothing to do with what you're trying to launch. So we're really far from the technology.
But it's in terms of change management, the biggest challenge. Well, change management is typically not something that comes out of an IT budget.
Right.
So IT focuses on providing the solution, which makes sense, right? And then when you say, well, you really would need some change management, then oftentimes you get the answer, well, that's really not our department, which is right. But because M365 is so much more than an IT project, I also often come into the situation where an IT department has never really actively been in a conversation exchange with HR or with organizational development or with the training department. And once we bring these different departments to the table, it's like eye-opening to them. And I think it also must feel good to them because they all of a sudden realize they're not alone in this whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then all of a sudden, maybe HR says, yeah, we have been thinking about implementing something that maybe speaks to leadership in remote work, right? Yeah. And IT says, oh, that's interesting. Oh, we have these challenges. And once you bring them to the table, I think it gets easier. And that's a challenge with change management in IT world, that when you speak to the IT leaders, change management is not their focus.
Yeah.
And you know what? In reality, it probably shouldn't.
Okay.
But it's really this dialogue that you have to have between IT, HR, organizational development, and then really look at it together.
Yeah.
So, and
it's never just an IT thing, right?
It definitely is not, right? And we can roll out the greatest thing. If the people really don't see what's in it for them, then, well, are they going to look at it?
It's just going to sit there.
Yeah. And I mean, as a change manager, I come in and, I mean, change management in the end is really about communication. So it doesn't matter if I help find an executive sponsor, I enable the person to talk about this change, or if I work out a communication plan or a training plan, or if we deal with resistant management. I mean, we're always in communication mode, right? So, and it's not about necessarily telling people, oh, you click here or there, and this is really great for you, and this is how quick you can do that. And I don't know about you, but if somebody tells me, well, this is going to be so much quicker, my instant reaction is, well, what if I don't want to be quicker, right?
Yeah.
It's like, that's not what it is about. But if you can really show people, look, if you use these type of functionalities, it's always my favorite example, collaborating in real time in a document. So it's such a great functionality. Yeah. But you know what the real value behind it is? It's not even that we're saving time because we don't have to reconcile files.
Yeah.
It's because when different people are responsible for their part in the file, and some person does not have to reconcile it, whoever presents that file in a big presentation with management can go in there more relaxed because they know everybody took care of their part. They want the best for their part, and there's less manual mistake, and I can present better, and we all look good and feel good about what we do.
Yeah.
That's the real value add for a lot of these functionalities.
It's not time you're saving. It's just like overall efficiency and better the quality of work. Yeah.
And that's change management. Yeah. It's like this, what's the real value add? The real value add is that I can go home at 5 o'clock, I ask a question on Teams in a chat, I have to pick up my kids, I have an important meeting at 8 in the morning, my coworker in the Teams app answered at 6 o'clock in the evening, I look at it in the morning, 7 o'clock on my cell phone, on my device, I'm good to go, I have less stress. That's the real added value of cloud,
Yeah. What do you think are the top or the most important questions that they need to ask in their organization in order to do better change management? Obviously, it's not just about asking questions,
right?
But just to help you guide people a little bit on where to start and what's the important thing that they should be looking into.
Well, you can start with change management everywhere, and just a little bit of change management is better than no change management. But basically, when I come into a project, I have to get a feel for the culture of how are people working together, how are they communicating with each other, right? Because typically, my question usually is, well, is there an executive sponsor? Is there somebody who really says,
sponsorship within the business?
I'm sponsoring this change, and I will be the one talking about it? Because if you just start with training and a communication plan, meaning you put a little message out in Teams, or you write something, in a newsletter. Companies still have newsletters. It's hard to believe. Or you put a post on Yammer or Viva Engage, wherever. Yeah. It's all good and fine, but there has to be this message from the top saying we are moving into this direction as a company. And when you go into the cloud with M365, the decision is often made consciously, but it's not consciously communicated.
Yeah.
So I always ask, do we have an executive sponsor?
Right.
It's really important.
Yeah.
Then, of course, I get a feel for the culture and the company, and then I see, well, who are the people that are really excited about this? So these could become my champions.
And I have some. If you're a sponsor, then you have your ambassadors.
Yeah. But another thing that's also really important for change management, at least from my point of view, I mean, I'm a consultant. I make money consulting, and of course, I'm happy if I can be 5 years with the same client doing change management. Would it be a good idea? Probably not, because the change has to come from within.
Yeah.
So it's important to find out if there's the willingness for knowledge transfer. So ideally to me is I have people on the inside that recognize, yes, we have to support the people in adapting to this change, and I can pass it on to them, and we do things together.
Yeah. So essentially, it's not about, if I'm understanding correctly, what you're saying is that when you're taking care of change management, you're not making the change. You're essentially enabling the organization to change.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I need to understand where we're coming from. I need to understand where we're going. You need to understand why we're actually doing that, and oftentimes that's really not that clear. Like, yeah, okay, we have teams now because all of a sudden from, when was it, April 1st, 2020, we all went into home office. Boom.
Yeah.
That was it. Okay, there's a good reason. But then now when you start expanding on teams, I mean, at some point, well, why do we stick with this, right? So the reason why, it makes sense. So that's something that has to be examined. And I'm personally still a fan of training people because, and you can do this in different settings, but I like that because training, again, is communication. Yeah. And when I talk about training, it's not a matter of click here and click there, but it's a matter of saying, you know, try it out. It's okay. There are always 3 dots somewhere in M365. Don't be afraid, click on it. Yeah. There are more functionality
Nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen.
Yeah. And by the way, I show you a lot. You don't have to remember everything in detail. Just become aware what there is. Yeah. Start playing around with it, and then try to figure out what's relevant to your job.
It's more switching that mentality, helping them switch that mentality, as opposed to just like having them take notes and remember everything.
Be curious. You know, it's a big platform. It's a small way in, and there's more, and you have it at your fingertips. But you don't have to use it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think I'm curious. We've touched a little bit on this, and I don't know if you'll agree with the question, but essentially with IT being kind of like really overwhelmed, with its onboarding users, offboarding users, adapting to change to new technology really quickly. They're very overwhelmed, and obviously change management is something that takes a lot of time, effort, commitment. It's not something that you can just do, you know, just on the as a side project. How do you think IT leaders, or maybe just organizations in general, can enable their teams to be more successful and be more efficient in their change management?
I think it's important in IT departments that IT leaders give their team members the opportunity to learn.
Okay.
So make them aware what learning possibilities there are. So in terms of M365, you have learn.microsoft.com, you have the support, you have adoption, and not only offer it to your team members, but actively enable them, like saying, okay, if you take 2 or 3 hours during the week that you really dedicate to learning, that will be helpful. Because you can offer your team members to, go and learn, no problem. But if I feel that I'm not allowed to do that, I'm not going to do that.
There's other stuff I need to do. There's other deliverables that are more important. Yeah.
The next thing I think IT leaders should do is really encourage their people to build a network. Okay. And not only internally. I mean, if you're in an IT department of just 20 people, obviously everybody knows each other, right? But if you're in a larger team, I think it's important to reach out to each other and understand what knowledge you have within the IT department. But I think it's also important that you build your network outside
the IT
company.
Department.
Absolutely, outside your company.
Outside the company, okay.
So even better, actually, good point. Thank you very much. Didn't even think of it. Outside your IT, so within people on the business side, right? So you get to know each other, but even more importantly, outside your organization.
Okay.
Because, I mean, take me for an example. I mean, here in the M365 world, we all have some sort of specialty, and I always use that as an example. If I get a question from some client about OneDrive, I probably know the answer to a certain point, and I can Google it, and then I have to check, well, who's the source? Is it reliable? But if I have somebody in my network who is an expert on OneDrive, he's here, Hans Brenda, I know him, I've talked to him about it, I call him, I said, hey, this is what I think it is, and he can immediately confirm to me, yes, you're right there, or by the way, watch out for this.
It's true, that's a great way to get that knowledge in your organization, is go get it outside. It doesn't need to come from a blog post or from whatever, it can come from your network of peers and experts.
And Microsoft has built over the years such an incredible space of resources, be it blogs, be it, I was just talking to Mark Cashman before, his IntraZone podcast. I mean, he does a podcast on a monthly basis with what's new in SharePoint. Half an hour and you're in the know, right? So let your team know that there are a lot of resources from Microsoft, and then it's okay for them, and they have dedicated time where they can then actually absorb it and consume it. And I think this is going to give confidence to people in the IT department. I think it's also going to create awareness that, well, maybe John being the one lone expert on this, it's probably a little bit outdated. And at the same time, if you really engage inside your department with other departments, your company, or outside in the community, well, when do you learn best? When you talk to each other, right? Because if I ask you a question, you might offer something to me that I wasn't really asking about, but give me an impulse, right?
You don't know what you don't know, right?
Right, you don't know what you don't know. It's like, oh, Laurent said something to me. I didn't even think of. I'll just take that. I'll look into that, and boom, I learned something new. And I might say something where you say, oh, interesting perspective. So this really engaging with each other. And I think if IT leaders enable their teams to do that and allow them and give them the resources, I think overall that's really going to lead to way more success.
No, absolutely. I think it's hard to argue with that assessment of creating that kind of like network effect and enabling.
But I tell you, you would be surprised. I mean, every session I do, I talk about this networking. Actually, yesterday in my session, I said, I'm going to give everyone a challenge in here. By the end of ESPC, I want you to have connected with 5 people on LinkedIn. And not just because you saw a name tag, you scanned it, but because you had a meaningful conversation with that person and you know what you can ask that person about. And I think a lot of folks in the IT world, well, they might not be the most extrovert and they might not be the most social. So you also have to nudge them a little bit and, again, show them how much fun it could be to learn together.
And it doesn't hurt.
Exactly. So,
Good. All right. One last question for you. You might have heard of the expression, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Do you think that resonates with Microsoft 365 and Teams change management? So how are you able to kind of measure the impact and the success of your adoption and change management practices in your organizations? Are there ways to do that?
Well, of course, there's some ways to measure it. I mean, you can measure if you roll out Teams, how many meetings do we have in Teams now? How many files do we have uploaded in SharePoint? Have we uploaded in OneDrive? How many chats have taken place, right? How many calls? You have all that in the reporting center and admin center. You can check all of this. This is great. You have all these adoption measures. But I think from the change management side, when you put people first, it's going to become subjective very quickly. So, and then what you got to do is you got to do some surveys. Ideally do them on a regular basis, like record the baseline. And then say every 6 months or 9 months, do it again. And then you're going to ask questions about, did you feel there was enough communication? Did you feel informed? Did you know where to go when you had questions? And that's really, it's on the emotional side of things. And then just record that and then bring these two things together. Because even though...
Give context to the data that you're getting from Microsoft.
Because whatever you do in terms of change measures, they're perceived by individuals differently. So even if we say, well, we had a really great communication plan and we had so many communication pieces and we had really the right messaging and we delivered it and we know people clicked on it and looked at it, does not mean that they felt informed.
That's fair.
So this is where you got to get a feel for it. And even if the rates go up, I think you should still do that on the side because people might still feel stressed. But you're not going to see if people are stressed based on how many files were uploaded to SharePoint.
No, I agree.
So I think that what you have to measure is really how are they doing emotionally? Are they feeling overwhelmed? Are they doing good? And then gauge that and then accordingly adjust your measures, which might be more pointed communication, which might be enabling the mid-level management to speak differently to something, right? Which might be allowing some more training features or something, and then just basically go about this. Or maybe think about, do we have a good feedback mechanism in place? What if people are not happy? How can they actually... Where can they express that, right?
It's true.
Without being afraid that it's being used against them. So this is how you adjust. So I think, it's much harder to measure the success of change management because it's the emotional side of things, but I do think it's possible. And well, you just got to be more patient. My favorite sentence at the end is always to be patient is also an activity.
Yeah.
Yeah, just as I should actually have the sentence copyrighted.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a perfect closing statement, I think. So that was super insightful. Thank you for sharing all that
Sure.
insight with us in terms of teams management. I hope you have a great rest of your session. Thanks for being us with
Thank you very much.
today. And,
Pleasure talking to you.
Yeah. All right. So thanks
Thank you.
everyone. We'll see you next time on the next Rising Up episode. Take care.
Should I talk too much?
That was good. No, that's fine.
like-
Honestly.